Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas vows to keep the pressure on Russia after her Reform Party secures first place in parliamentary elections.
After 15 years of negotiations, UN members have agreed on a treaty to protect the high seas, a body of water that covers almost half of the planet.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has arrived in Germany for talks with the government.
Celebrations among supporters of Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas. Her Reform Party has secured first place in Sunday's parliamentary election with 31.6%. Kallas said the election leaves the party in a strong position to form a coalition government that will keep the pressure on Russia.
We have to do major reforms regarding green transition, for example, but we also have to invest in our security. Our aggressive neighbor has not vanished and will not vanish, so we have to work with that.
Kallas had faced a challenge from the far-right populist EKRE party, which wants to limit the Baltic nations' exposure to the Ukraine crisis and blames the current government for Estonia's high inflation rate.
We've had the highest inflation in Europe. We've had the biggest drop in living standards, the biggest drop in economics. So we are very rapidly moving into a very multi-pronged crisis in Estonia. And I don't see the liberal parties actually understanding it or being able to solve it.
In order to stay in power, Reform will again have to form a coalition with one or more of the parties that entered the Baltic states' 101-seat parliament.
In a once-in-a-generation move, more than 100 countries have agreed to a UN treaty to protect the high seas, a body of water that covers nearly half of the planet.
Good evening-ish, ladies and gentlemen. The ship has reached the shore.
The agreement marks 15 years of negotiations, and it's directed at international waters that are not currently under the control or protection of nations. And while the treaty still needs to be formally adopted, campaigners are already praising the move. Once enacted, it will create a new body to manage the conservation of ocean life and delineate protected zones in the high seas. It will also knit together different regional treaties, paving the way for conservation efforts to better protect a number of marine species, including dolphins, sea turtles, and many fish.
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz welcoming European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen to the country. She was invited to a closed meeting of the cabinet on Sunday, just days after a decision on phasing out combustion engines was postponed because of German demands. Von der Leyen said it was important to invest in the clean energy sector in Europe.
Wir müssen den Fokus darauf legen, dass wir auch in Zukunft die führende Region sein werden bei den sauberen Technologien. Wir müssen die Rahmenbedingungen für Clean Tech verbessern.
She said the EU was engaged in constructive dialogue with Germany about the controversial plans to ban the production of the internal combustion engines in vehicles by 2035. Von der Leyen added that while there was full support for the principle of technological openness, it must be balanced with the EU's climate policy goals. She's due to meet with US President Joe Biden next Friday.
Ministers from 5 EU Mediterranean countries have met in Malta to discuss migrant crossings. Less than a week after a deadly shipwreck off the coast of Italy killed at least 70 people, and their goal to push back against their EU neighbours for not voluntarily accepting asylum seekers.
Today, the 5 of us have shared our experience on the ongoing implementation of voluntary solidarity mechanism, and we have reached the same conclusion. It's not working as desired. The procedure is too slow, too selective, with too few results and too little predictability.
According to a minister from Greece, the bloc's non-Mediterranean states only voluntarily accepted 1% of the migrants crossing the body of water last year. Officials also called for the EU's border agency to speed up deportations of people who do not qualify for asylum.
Tens of thousands of protesters took to the streets of Athens on Sunday over the deadly train crash in Larissa, which killed at least 57 people, mainly students. Tear gas and stun grenades were used when violent clashes broke out between police and demonstrators outside the Greek parliament. The crowds gathered after calls by rail workers and public sector employees to express their grief and anger. Flowers were laid on the tracks at a railway station in northern Greece to honour the victims of those who died in the tragedy.
A massive fire hit a crammed refugee camp for Rohingya Muslims in southern Bangladesh on Sunday, leaving thousands homeless. A fire official at the camp in Cox's Bazar said that no casualties have been reported. The UNHCR in Bangladesh tweeted that it's providing support. More than 700,000 Rohingya Muslims fled to Bangladesh from Myanmar in 2017 when the military launched a brutal crackdown. The United States has called Myanmar's oppression of the Rohingya a genocide.
The city of Kharkiv in northeastern Ukraine was one of the hardest hit during the Russian offensive on the region last year that was defeated by the Ukrainian forces. Situated some 40 kilometers away from the Russian border, it's still under regular fire of Russian missiles. In the city outskirts, in a location kept secret, the Kharkiv prosecutor spokesman takes me on a tour of what has been named the Kharkiv Missile Cemetery.
Ось така оболонка цього снаряду. Вона має ось такі нарізи всередині, і в момент вибуху вони розлітаються, вражаючи людей, які отримують тілесні ушкодження і дуже сильні кровопотері, від чого дуже часто помирають на місці вибуху.
More than 1,000 missiles have been gathered here since the start of the war. Sorted by size and shape, they're analysed to provide international tribunals with evidence of alleged war crimes committed by Russian forces against civilians.
Прокурор та слідчі описують ці знайдені припаси для того, аби прив'язати конкретний обстріл, конкретний час обстрілу, зафіксувати це, і фіксуються також постраждавші, загиблі особи, зруйновані об'єкти інфраструктури, для того, аби ми могли конкретизувати, деталізувати відповідальність кожної особи в подальшому.
What is the number of civilians who were killed by these missiles?
Більше ніж 1500 цивільних осіб було вбито під час обстрілів на території Харкова та Харківської області, і понад 2700 осіб отримали тілесні ушкодження від цих обстрілів. Зараз у нас є більше 6 тисяч кримінальних проваджень, що стосуються порушення законів і звичаїв війни, тобто це 438 стаття Кримінального кодексу України, це за фактами обстрілів.
There have already been 2 air raid alerts here in the space of about 20 minutes. People are always bracing for new attacks, but the Ukrainian military command doesn't expect a massive offensive on Kharkiv right now for lack of resources, they say, of the Russian forces. From Valerie Goria in Kharkiv for Euronews.
Rehearsals for a production by Italian dancer and choreographer Silvia Gribaudi. Fluid, irreverent, funny, the former classical dancer's art glides between dance, theatre and the circus. Graces is inspired by Italian neoclassical sculptor Antonia Canova's Three Graces and is a reflection on the body, the need for it to be free regardless of form, gender and aesthetics. It's a hymn to self-acceptance.
Rispetto al corpo, ovviamente siamo inondati di stereotipi e ognuno di noi decide poi come stare all'interno delle forme del corpo. La parola perfetto, non perfetto, sono sempre parole scivolose, secondo me, proprio perché esiste una zona quasi sconosciuta, una zona di confine dentro cui forse perfezione e imperfezione non esistono più, ma esiste semplicemente la forma fatta di volume, di spazi. Anche il corpo è fatto di questo.
But how to deal with judgment, even shame sometimes? With irony, she says.
Forse è proprio stata l'ironia e lo humor a darmi quella distanza da tutto quello che in qualche modo prima come danzatrice poteva crearmi una difficoltà nel sentirmi non adeguata, perché lo humor e il clown vive nell'essere inadeguato, nell'essere sbagliato. E quindi dentro a questo continuo errore trovare una grande risorsa portato nella danza mi ha dato una valvola di rivoluzione, veramente rivoluzione, la rivoluzione che parte dal trasformare attraverso l'ironia, del poter dire in libertà quello che pensi ridendo insieme agli altri.
Gribaudi believes strongly that there's room for everyone in dance. She says you just need to find your own master and then discover your personal poetic key to enhance your uniqueness.